Okay, so I'm going to now shed the diplomatics, because when something manifestly insane takes place in your face, there's no reason to be polite about it.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. As you know, Trudeau was stuck in India this weekend because his plane broke. The reason for him being there in the first place was because India was hosting the G20. You might assume that the Prime Minister's broken plane and needing to call an air version of an Uber might have been the most embarrassing aspect of that trip, but you would be wrong.
And we don't mean in a comedic way. Trudeau continues to seriously embarrass Canada on the world stage because he can't hide behind his government-funded media. His narcissism runs so deep that he doesn't understand that the world is always watching. Before we get into that, help us keep this channel growing strong by hitting that like button to help push this out to more viewers, and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of our next episode. Thank you to Pan Pot for buying us a pizza. If you would like to support the channel, check out the description of this video for more details. Justin Trudeau believed he can choose when and where Canadians can exercise their rights. And when a leader can choose when his people have rights, then they don't really have any rights at all.
He believes that the only media that reports on events in Canada is his state-funded media, led by the CBC. He thinks there is a virtual wall around the country that prevents external journalists from seeing the evils that he is committing and the dark road that he has led Canadians down. He believes that with a wave of his hand, he can dazzle foreign dignitaries and use smoke and mirrors to portray a shiny image of himself with no flaws. Well, he's wrong.
Instead, the world looked on and gasped at the measures that our government enacted. An Australian outlet reported, quote, "Having these insane orders, and let's not forget this, it goes beyond anything we've seen in this country, and we've talked a lot about Dan Andrews' emergency powers in Victoria. This is nothing like what we're talking about in Canada. They were seizing funds. They were freezing people's bank accounts without court orders. Absolutely disgusting, despicable behavior you would not expect in any sort of democracy," end quote.
Just this past weekend, it seems Justin Trudeau was confused as to why he wasn't invited to the major media announcements and gatherings. Well, if he's still wondering, he just needs to turn on the Indian news to know why, because they didn't hold back.
Two issues you didn't mention. One that has been reported by the Indian media, quoting Indian government sources who say Prime Minister Modi spoke to you about the presence, or in his terms, of Sikh Khalistani militants in Canada. And the second is the question of interference in Canada by India, which has been cited by Canada's own intelligence agencies. Did neither of those topics come up?
No, they both came up over the years with Prime Minister Modi. We've had many conversations on both of those issues. Obviously, Canada will always defend freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of peaceful protest. That's something that's extremely important to us. At the same time as we're always there to prevent violence, to push back against hatred.
Okay, so I'm going to now shed the diplomatics, because when something manifestly insane takes place in your face, there's no reason to be polite about it. Justin Trudeau has just shown you the finger when it comes to Khalistan. This man has just come after imposing an emergency in his country to crack down on the freedom of expression and the right to peaceful protest, and has just talked about the freedom of expression and the rule of law and the right to protest. Okay? Now the truth is, Mr. Trudeau, like any good Punjabi, I have family in Canada, and I promise you the nonsense that you're talking is emanating from sheer hubris, a total disconnected view of the world, where you think that we don't see what you're up to, we don't understand what you're up to, and you can continue behaving in a totally nonsensical fashion, talking nonsense. You imposed an emergency in your country, your father imposed an emergency in your country, your democratic credentials are under deep question. And if Khalistan is a problem, and if a Khalistan is to be created, it is more likely it is going to be created within the territorial boundaries of Canada. And let me add to that, we should become, or at least I will, become the biggest proponent of the independence of Quebec, which has been trying to secede from Canada for the longest period of time. And I have a big question on why the map of Canada should not be described as Canadian Occupied Quebec, COQ. Perhaps we should issue a map of the world as well. Complete nonsense. You come out and spoken once again. You could have taken it seriously. You should have taken it seriously, but you didn't. Patikrit, this man, last time he came for a bilateral to India, showed up with a Khalistani in his entourage. What is going on? I mean, it's after a point, it's totally insane. You can't say it's domestic politics. You can't say he doesn't get it. You can't say that the emergency in Canada didn't happen. You were beating up truckers in Canada. You were freezing their bank accounts. I mean, what is this guy talking? Which world is he living in?
Rishabh, he's a perfect example of pseudo-liberal wokeism and how it is destroying a certain section of the West. He doesn't understand the difference between a peaceful protest and a civil unrest or an uncivil unrest with the placard of a terrorist who actually bombed a plane which killed a lot of Canadians. And he doesn't understand the difference between the two.
Has he forgotten what happened in Lockerbie? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. And so, you know, when it comes to territorial integrity or sovereignty or respecting the sovereignty of a country, I don't understand where these guys lose the plot. Who has said that, you know, India is a country which has always, you know, thrived on the whole concept of democratic protest. We do not need to learn from Trudeau what that is. But the Khalistani issue that he has been propping up today, you are very right that tomorrow, see, there is no question, no chance, not an iota of possibility that a Khalistani would ever be created in Punjab or in India.
We live here, okay? Yeah. We live here, we know this. But that's just the fact on the ground, okay? There is no Khalistani movement here in India, except for what the funding, and the funding isn't coming from Pakistan anymore, okay? Canada is the epicenter. But okay, so what do we do with this man?
So, some of you might be wondering, what are they talking about when they're talking about the Khalistani movement? And this seems to be at the epicenter of the anger towards Trudeau. So this all kind of started because there's a small movement that wants to carve out a homeland for a specific, you know, demographic of Indian. And there's a bunch of people within that movement in Canada. And there was a parade in Canada where some of these people, not many, but some of them, made a float. And on that float, they depicted some pretty graphic violence of someone being killed. And it was related to the government of India. So the Indian government is essentially saying, how are you allowing that as freedom of speech? That doesn't make any sense. And you are supporting essentially a group of people in your country that are inciting violence towards the government of India. That's basically what they're saying. And it's a legitimate complaint. So that's at the crux of what this is. We could do probably a whole other video diving into this issue, but that's really what their complaint is. But the real thing to focus on is they saw what happened in Canada for exactly what it is. Notice they didn't talk about whether they agreed with the issue, right? They didn't talk about whether they agreed with whether the trucker convoy was valid in the message that it was saying, because that's irrelevant. As we've said before, it doesn't matter if you agree with what the trucker convoy was there for. What matters is they had the right to protest. And what the government did in response to that was insane. It was absolutely insane. No democratic government in the West has ever went to those lengths. And then even after the fact, now we're sitting here putting the leaders of this convoy on trial. Trudeau talks about freedom of speech at the G20.
Do you want to see what freedom of speech looks like in Canada? This is what it's supposed to look like. And this is what it actually looks like.
How has the arrest affected your life?
I've lost my job. I've lost my freedom of speech. I've lost my freedom to communicate with my friends, which was quite traumatizing because we just experienced something huge. And we didn't get any time to even sit down as a group and just talk about it and talk about our experience. We didn't have that opportunity. That was taken away from me. I have to be very careful about every move that I make. As you know, I was arrested on an alleged breach charge for attending a dinner in Toronto. I had the police show up at the place that I'm staying last weekend because somebody saw me outside smoking a cigarette. I have a daughter that I don't want her to be seen with me. Because I'm worried. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
I have yet to see the particulars of the mischief that I am alleged to have committed. It's definitely affected my life. It's something that I've never been arrested before. The legal process, I find extremely frustrating. My trial's not till next year. I have to live under these conditions for a year. But I'll make it work. I'll manage. And I did everything I felt that I could do in my power through the lives that I was doing. And I believe it worked as I was advocating again for peaceful protest, respect the police, please respect other people. That was a big part of the reason I did that live the last night.
That got me emotional. I'm not sure about all of you.
I know you can't see him, but Cypher is sitting here crying. And it takes a lot to get Cypher to like physically cry real tears. It's just, I don't think either of us, and especially me, I don't think we appreciated what was going on at the time. You know, Ottawa's not like, you know, provinces away, but it was still far enough that we're like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect us. But it does affect us. We didn't see it then, but we understand it now, that Tamara and everybody else was just, they were standing up for our rights to stop this government from silencing us. Look at everything we've lost. You know, during COVID, we lost our freedom of association because you were locked in your house. You couldn't go anywhere. We lost the right to decide with our physicians what medical treatments would be best for us. The government mandated that and people were losing their jobs. We lost our freedom to protest, to peacefully protest. You saw those images. But the media wants you to see the violence, the clash. They don't care about showing you the other side. And I think that's why, at least I didn't realize what was at stake and what still is at stake until we started doing this program.
And again, it doesn't matter whether or not you agree with what they were protesting for. Okay? It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the government's response to that protest that was peaceful.
And if you haven't seen that interview between Tamara Leach and Jordan Peterson, please go watch it. It's not only is it excellent, because it is excellent, but there's just this one part where Tamara describes exactly how Freeland was behaving when she got the authorization to start cutting off people's bank accounts.
Yeah, she talks about being almost giddy.
It's horrific. What kind of government minister is that gleeful about destroying people's lives?
And normally we would show you that clip, but we're not going to this time because
we want you to go to Jordan Peterson's channel and watch that full interview.
Well, and it would also show disrespect to Tamara and Chris Barber, who are fighting for their freedom right now. Literal freedom. Because the government chose to come after them. And I'm hoping that it won't be successful. They already got the judge, the Crown prosecutor already got the judge pissed at them because they completely fumbled protocol. And fumble's not the right word, because it was pretty obvious that it was intentional to try to drop a whole bunch of new evidence on the defense with only 3 or 4 days to look at it. That's not due process in Canada. That's not giving the defense the opportunity to mount a fair rebuttal.
And regardless of what you believe the outcome of the trial should be, everybody deserves the right to a proper defense. And that's not what's happening here. The Crown is trying some really shady shit, and that's not okay.
And remember, they were trying to hold Tamara without bail. Contrast that to all of the violent criminals that keep entering and exiting Trudeau's justice system. They get bail every time, and then they go out on the street, and then they commit a violent act in the afternoon. But you want to take someone like Tamara and say, no, she's a big threat. And the Crown came out and said, well, her political views aren't on trial here. You want to bet? Everyone can see what's on trial here. And it's not for this bogus charge. That's what freedom of speech looks like in Canada. That's the road that Trudeau has led us down.
Our freedoms were hard fought, but they're easily lost. So we need to make sure that this government does not succeed in stripping our freedoms from us.
Just as Tamara was telling everybody at that convoy, we're going to let her know right now, just in case she's listening. Hold the line. You got this. Now, we're not going to end this video on a very sour note. We're going to end it on a hopeful note. Because I received a phone call today. And the phone call was from our friends in the Conservative Party. And they told me that, and this is public now, like this is not just, a private conversation. They are calling all of the registered members of the Conservative Party and letting them know that there are swirling rumors that Trudeau is about to call an election.
The lady who called spoke to Cypher and said, an election is imminent, and we are trying to raise funds to do up an ad for Pierre, for the Conservatives. And would you like to donate? And we said yes. And I am hopeful that it wasn't just hype, that she was correct, that an election is imminent. And here's why I think one might be imminent. Because we released that video yesterday about the turmoil within the Liberal Party. They see that they're losing seats. They're getting angry. The NDP, the polls have already projected that they're losing 4 seats. That's nearly 20% of the seats that they have in the House of Commons right now. So no doubt they're getting nervous. We only need, I think by my math, was either 16 or 18 party members. And they can come from the Liberal or the NDP. Doesn't really matter. But we only need 16 or 18 party members from the coalition to vote non-confidence along with the Conservatives, the Bloc, and everybody else that's in there. So I am wondering if these disgruntled party members might pull the plug.
Now you may say, bull crap, bull crap. What are we about to start, everybody? We're about to start a public inquiry to look into Trudeau and Chinese interference. If things are as bad as CSIS has led us to believe, can you think of a better reason to call an election to stop a public inquiry? Think about it.